Welcome to the NFL MVP Momentum Podcast. I'm Sam Holcroft, and alongside Payton Thompson. Before we begin, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP, follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. So last week we talked about our awards prediction, and this is our season prediction. So we got PT and I here, but we also have Zeke's that I haven't looked at quite yet. So we'll see who we have winning divisions, who we have going to the wild card, and we'll talk about any discrepancies that we have, which I have a feeling that we might have a couple. So the first one, we'll start with the NFC East. So we got Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, and Commanders that finished in that order last year. I don't know about you, but I expect the Eagles just to be rolling. So does Zeke. Do you have the Cowboys or the Giants taking that division, or are you still going with the Eagles?
So I guess we're kind of starting off with a bang here, but yeah,
Oh,
I
no.
do have the Cowboys taking the division actually, and I if we go back to podcasts earlier, I have this stated that I believe the Eagles are going to take a step back. Not because their roster is any worse. I think their roster is fine, their coaching's fine, everything is fine, but I just believe that they're bound to take a step back because of how successful they were last year. I think teams are going to be able to figure them out a little bit better this year, and I think the Cowboys have the roster to do it. My only caveat with that is that it's really going to be dependent on Dak Prescott. If Dak Prescott is what he thinks he can be and what the coaching staff thinks he can be, then they'll be fine, and I have confidence in that. And I think Tony Pollard is ready to take that starting role. I like CeeDee Lamb as their wide receiver one. I like Brandon Cooks as their deep threat, and that their defense is going to be dominant. So I think they have the roster to be that winner.
Okay, so last week when I said that the Eagles were going to go 15-2, you didn't want to say like, "Hey, they're not even winning the division." I was not ready for
I wanted
that.
to save it. I didn't want to get too far ahead of myself. I had to save
I
the
mean,
surprise.
yeah, I mean, you definitely surprised me there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do. I have the Eagles going 15-2. I still have the Cowboys making the playoffs at 9-8. I just don't think that they are. They're just not as ready as the Eagles are. Like depth wise, I mean, they got good starters, but I just don't know, like, if Dak goes down again, are they going to be ready, to have a backup plan? Which, I mean, that's sometimes the best thing is like losing your quarterback for half a season is then next season you are like, hey, if this happens again, we know what we have to do, what our schemes are, what our situational ideas are. Um, I actually had the Giants taking a huge step back. I don't think that they're going to be playoff worthy, which is really hard to say because like I feel like they got better, but I mean I feel like the Commanders also got better. Sam Howell is their biggest question mark, but the team's bought into him, so I feel like that division is going to be tough, and I feel like that the Cowboys could lose a few games to not only the Eagles but the Commanders and Giants. But I do have both Eagles and Cowboys making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think we can probably agree this is the hardest division in the NFC, like as a whole. But I will say I didn't, have the Giants making the playoffs as well. I do have them being still very competitive, but like you said before, I just think that with this division being really tough, I think a couple other teams in the NFC getting better, they're going to be in that wild card spot. I just don't think it's very realistic to think. And I mean, especially with obviously the Eagles making the wild card spot for me. I just don't think it's realistic to think that the Giants are going to make it this year. Although I did think their roster got better, I just don't know how much they can rely on Saquon and Daniel Jones to be their guys. Um, but yeah, I have the Cowboys at the 2 seed here.
Yep. So I had the Eagles at the 1, and so did Zeke. Uh, Zeke had the Cowboys at the 5, and the Cowboys were actually the 7 for me. So
Okay.
they and I think I did have them losing Yes, I did. I had them losing the last game of the season, but that's because they clinched a playoff spot, so they didn't. They were like resting starters. They weren't going to pull the same
Yeah,
mistake that they did last year and, you know, try for 4 quarters and then give up the last 10 minutes and still lose. So,
right. Yeah.
so we can move on to the NFC North now.
Yep.
So, Vikings won the division last year with the Lions being second, Packers being third. The Lions actually beating the Packers, so the Packers can't go to the playoffs. And then the Bears were fourth in that division. Who do you have as some playoff teams there?
So, I mean, I think that for the most part, you'll agree with me here. I don't think that this division is too hard to pick out. I think it really just depends on whether you like the Vikings or the Lions more. I have the Vikings winning the division once again. I think when you talk about the roster and how good they were last year, obviously they were really close in those one possession games, and that could flip very easily. But I think when you talk about Justin Jefferson and you talk about Alexander Madison getting the start, TJ Hawkinson being there, Jordan Addison being there, and the defense that they have there, I think that realistically they should be the division winner there. But I think the Lions could make a case if Dan Campbell is able to get his guys in position because they, obviously they, exceeded expectations last year, and I expect them to get a lot better this year. But I expect the Vikings to be my 3 seed, and I had the Lions being the 6 seed wild card.
Dang, and then they'd be facing off in that first round.
Yep.
So I think that the Lions are going to take a step this year. I have them going 10-7. They are the 4 seed for me. I do think that the defense is going to be well prepared, and I do think that the offense is going to be business as usual. But the Vikings, for me, I don't have them making the playoffs. They're actually, if there was an 8 seed, they would be the 8 seed because
Wow.
you alluded to that you expect the Vikings to be good like they were last year. But were they good or were they lucky? That's a question that we can ask because 11-0 in one possession games. I mean, here's the thing: they had two amazing comebacks. Against the Bills where they were down 2 possessions with I think like 7 minutes left, and win it in overtime. And then when they were down 30-0 at half against the Colts, and they come back and
Yeah.
win that too, and also in overtime. Like, I mean, you could say that that's good, but luck's got to be on your side to win 11 one-possession games because then
Yeah.
the first one-possession game that they lost was against the Giants in the playoffs where they looked not good. So that could leave a bad taste in their mouth. So I actually have the Vikings going 8-9, and I think that I think the Bears are going to be right on their tail too. Zeke and I both have the Bears as the third team in that division, um, but I think that the Bears are closer to the Vikings than the Vikings are to the Lions.
Wow. Um, I will say, as I alluded to last week in the podcast, I think it's gonna, obviously start and end with the Kirk Cousins to Justin Jefferson connection, and obviously losing Dalvin Cook kind of hurts as well. But, I think if Kirk Cousins is, the same or at least like, I don't know, he's got to be the same because if he's any worse than he was last year, then the team does get significantly worse. So he's got to be the same kind of guy, and I think it might depend on him whether they make the playoffs or not and win the division.
Yeah, and then Zeke had the Vikings just like you win the division. They're the 3 seed, but he has Detroit as the 7 seed.
Okay.
So now we'll talk about your team's division. We'll talk about the NFC South. So the Bucks won the division last year with I think a 9-8 record or 8-9 potentially.
9-8, I
Um,
think.
9-8. Okay, and then the Panthers finished second in the division. Falcons finished third, and the Saints were last. So, uh, is it the Falcons' year? Tell me.
I mean, it's the Falcons' year to make the playoffs. I think as I have the playoffs set up, having the Eagles as my 5 seed and the Falcons as a 4 seed, it's going to be a very rough first playoff game for this young team. I think we make the wild card at that 4 spot, being the last team in the wild or in the division winner spot, and then we get smoked by the Eagles probably. But either way, I think it's going to be a successful season for Arthur Smith and company because I think this is what you went out and you spent veterans for to get those young guys as far as Bijan, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, the offensive line, some of the younger guys on defense, get those guys the playoff experience, and then try to make a run for next year after you acquire more cap room, more draft capital, and hopefully Desmond Ritter could be the guy, or you can chase a quarterback next year in free agency or the draft. But yeah, I have them winning the division, but I think it is going to be close. My second team I had was the Saints because Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, and that defense that's still there. I think it's going to be probably within 2 games reach, but I think we're going to edge them out. And it's funny because the Saints and the Falcons are both 1 and 2 in strength of schedules, with the Saints being number 1, so they do have the advantage there. It may just depend on who is going to be able to win more division games at that point, and I think it may come down to that. But with that being said, I think those are the 2 teams to beat in that division. I think that the Panthers will be, they'll be okay. I have them around 6 wins. I don't think they're going to be as bad as you might have them at, but I do think they're going to be decent with Bryce Young and company. I just have a lot of question marks as far as the offensive firepower. I think they need a little bit more receiving help. I think they need a go-to running back. And then I have the Buccaneers being in at about 3 to 4 wins. Just don't think that I don't think Baker's going to be enough to really will them any wins. I like obviously that they have that veteran talent on both sides of the ball, but I think a lot of the guys on their team are kind of out of their prime as far as Mike Evans. Chris Godwin is still kind of a guy, but he's a guy that's going to miss 4 or 5 games a year at minimum. The defense as well is a lot of guys that are kind of out of their prime, and so I think they had their window, and I think it's completely closed as it was kind of closing last year.
Yeah. I have the Buccaneers only winning 3 games. I expect them. I think I only had like them winning 1 or 2 games right around the trade deadline. I expect them to blow it up, try to get as much trade assets as he can out of all those guys. Levante David, Mike Evans, I mean, it could just be the Baker and Trey Palmer show by week 16,
Right.
Like
Yeah.
and late in the season, it was just like, let's see what these young guys can do. I have the Panthers only winning 4 games. I just feel like even though that they have what people deem an easy schedule, I still think that Bryce Young is going to have to learn, and he's going to have to learn the hard way because, I mean, Saints defense is good. The Falcons defense is good. And even if the Bucks like do kind of blow up, I think they'll still have a decent defense. But before they blow it up, they're going to have a good defense. They still have Devin White, Levante David, Winfield. I think Shaq Barrett's still there,
Yeah.
potentially. So they have great guys on that defense still, from that Super Bowl team a few years back. So he's going to learn the hard way. But and I've alluded to this, and this has been the division that I've been most curious because I haven't necessarily picked a division winner for a while. I've always been like, I think it's the Falcons, and then I always guess myself it's the Saints, and I just keep going back and forth. So I finally did this and went through all the games, and I do have the Saints winning the division. I have them going 12-5, and it's not. People can say because it's the easiest schedule in the league, but I think that this team can be good. And the reason this team can be good is because I think, and I've said this multiple times, Derek Carr has a chip on his shoulder to prove not only to himself, not only to the Raiders, but to the NFL, I wasn't the issue. It was them. So if he goes out there and I had them going 8-0 in the first 8 games. And that is a little bit of the schedule writing because they do have a lot of their easier games towards the front, but going 8-0 to start and that's going to put some teams on notice, and they're going to have a target on their back. But I'm not writing off the Falcons. I do have them making the playoffs as well as a wild card team, and I do think that they can win 11 games. I think they do have. I mean, they do have an easy schedule, but I do believe that defense is. They made the improvements on defense that they needed to, because, I mean, last year, costly penalties, cost you some games, and just the defense not being prepared to, because like when you are a run heavy team, you need a good defense. Look at the Jacksonville Jaguars in that 2017-2018 season. They had a great defense. They had Blake Bortles as their quarterback, and if he could have completed one or two more passes, they could have went to the Super Bowl. Blake Bortles, who was non-existent the year after that. They had Leonard Fournette. When you're a run-centric team, because you can be successful, you just have to have that good defense. And what did they do? What did they need last year? They needed veterans. Who did they go out and get? Calais Campbell, Jesse Bates, Bud Dupree. That's a guy in every level of the defense. That's a veteran that they needed. They also got some great guys as well. They have A.J. Terrell. They have Grady Jarrett. They have the guys to make that defense work. The biggest question mark is Desmond Ridder. But if you have that defense be as successful as you want, and you can run with Bijan and use him to the best of his abilities, you don't have to throw the ball. And if you do, you have guys that are 6'5" or taller at every corner of the field that you can throw to.
Yep.
So Desmond Ridder doesn't have to be the best. He's not going to fail Atlanta. He's going to be working hard. And when the time comes for him to do that play action, he's going to be ready. And I expect Atlanta to be the 5 seed in the NFC.
Who is your last division winner? Who would they be playing in the wild card round?
They'd be playing the Lions.
Okay. And see, I think I like that matchup a lot more for them versus a team like the Eagles or the Cowboys.
Definitely. Yeah, because that's who you two have. So
yeah.
You have anything else to add to the NFC South?
No, great explanation. I think you covered all the bases that I really feel strongly about.
Yeah, I just think Derek Carr. I'm gonna be.
He's
I'm
the
gonna be
veteran
pulling
quarterback
for him.
of the division, right?
Yeah,
It's hard to go away from that.
So, and I don't think that the 3-game suspension for Alvin Kamara is gonna do too much. I mean, I had them going 8-0, so obviously I think that they can win those first 3 games.
Right.
So we'll talk about the last NFC team or NFC division, which is the West. The 49ers won that division. The Seahawks finished second. I believe the Rams finished fourth, and then the Cardinals finished third. So, who do you have coming out on top here? I think I know.
Yeah, I don't think it's too much of you don't really have to think too hard about it. It should be the 49ers as long as their health is fine. I think really when it comes down to it, they really just have to be healthy on both sides of the ball. I've talked about that before. They have the play calling, they have the roster talent on both sides of the ball. They just have to stay healthy. And obviously having a full offseason with C-Mac and being able to have him for that first half of the season is going to be, great. I do think the one thing that they're going to have to figure out sooner rather than later is their quarterback position. But if it's Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan believes in Brock Purdy, then I believe in the vision because I think Kyle Shanahan knows what's going to be best for this team. And a little side note, it's kind of unfortunate the path that Trey Lance has had to take, and it sounds like he's going to be their third string guy at this point. And having to invest all that draft capital to move up to number 4 to take him. It's a little bit disappointing for them at this point. I mean, to think that they could have had, obviously it's hindsight's 2020, but to think that they could have had this offense with Jamar Chase is kind of a, I don't know, puzzling. But at the same time, they should be fine to win this division. And then my last team that I have making the final wild card spot is the Seattle Seahawks at that number 7 spot. I think with Geno Smith, with Pete Carroll, having the offensive guys that they have, also adding JSN and Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker having a good rookie season, and that defense getting even better. I would, and Jamal Adams being healthy as well. It's hard for me to not see them making the playoffs. But I think I think there's a case where they might miss it. But they are my final spot as a wild card team playing the Eagles in the first round. Or sorry, not the Eagles, the 49ers.
Yeah. So uh, Zeke had the almost the same thing as you. 49ers winning the division as being the 2 seed, and the Seahawks being the 6 seed. Um, yeah, I think that the 49ers, I mean, the Seahawks are making great improvements. Everyone wrote them off last year when they traded Russ, but they were still business as usual. But I mean, this is still a scary team, but it's the 49ers division. I have them as a 2 seed as well, only a game back from the Eagles. But I also have the Seahawks making the playoffs as a 6 seed, going 11-6. I think that, I mean, the Cardinals and Rams, they're not going to be playing for much this year. The Rams could be looking to blow it up at the trade deadline, so that could be 2 easy wins there. And even though they did lose JSN for a few games, or they will lose them for a few games, I still think that offense is going to be phenomenal. That defense is going to be looking good. I did raise some questions in a few podcasts ago about Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, considering that they are the starting corners for Seattle. And they combined have only 1 year of playoff experience. So we'll see how that secondary is, but I still expect this team to be a very good playoff team. All right, so now we can move on to the AFC. Let me pull that up. So we'll start off with the AFC East, and I'll go first on this one. So last year the Bills won the division, Dolphins went second, the Jets were third, and the Patriots finished last. So if you remember back to our tier list that we did about a month or so ago, I was talking about how I expect the Bills to take a step back. And then I did this. So sometimes I know what I'm saying. Sometimes I need to think these through. So I went through this, and as much as I want to rely on the Jets to make the big step and the Dolphins to be as good as I expect them to, I had the Bills winning the division. And not only that, they are the 1 seed for me, which I did not see coming. Just going through the schedule and analyzing, because here's the thing. When I was doing this, I had 3 seconds to make a pick. And if I can do it right away, if I have to hesitate, then I could maybe give it, depending on a location, if it's an overseas game, depending on buys. But I have the Bills going 13-4 and winning the division, which I would not have thought about. I would have been like, no, the Bills are like 11-win team. But no, they're winning that. But I'm not counting out the Dolphins. I do have them as the 5 seed going 12-5, which is a game back. And then they play each other week 18, so that game could be deciding, not necessarily just for the division, but for the number 1 overall seed. But I'm not also counting out the Jets either. You got to keep adding all these great teams. Jets I also have at 12-5. They're my 6th seed. They went out and they were last year, they were just a quarterback away from making the playoffs. They went out and got that. What did I say about the Jets during our tier list? They are running back away from being legitimate Super Bowl contenders. And they're 12-5. They're all 1 game apart from each other. So, and you can't count out the Patriots. No, I'm kidding. I'm done. The Patriots, they get 3 wins.
Man,
Sorry, I had to go. I had to go on a rant there. I'm sorry.
No, this is funny, man, because this shows how much we think alike, but how much can change from a couple games and a couple seedings. And it also shows how competitive the AFC is and how competitive this division is. So I don't know if you remember me saying this, but I alluded to Mike McDaniel winning Coach of the Year and Tyreek Hill
Yep.
being the Offensive Player of the Year. And let me start here. Actually, we both have the Jets as our 6th seed. I think that is pretty
Okay.
funny, and the fact that we had all 3 of these teams making the playoffs, rightfully so, I believe. And with the improvements that they've made, it just makes sense with their quarterback, with their defense, and like you said, their running back away. I believe that the 6th seed is probably their floor. So you can start there, and then at my 5 seed, I have the Bills. So I have the Bills, making that wild card spot, but not before the Dolphins make the 1 seed. I have our 1 seed and 5 seed flipped. So
Okay.
I think the Bills are going to be really good, but just in the case that the Dolphins are going to be the number 1 seed in the NFL, that's why I think that the Bills are going to have to be that 5 seed in that next up wild card spot. I think in any other division they would have been, a play or a 1 through 4 seed. They would have been a division winner, besides maybe the Chiefs. But I think any other division, I could have seen them, beating any other team out. But with the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins are going to have the health this year, and they're going to have Jonathan Taylor, or they're going to have the running back room, whoever that is, to be able to complete their team. And I think Mike McDaniel is going to be a great coach this year, and I think he's going to elevate this team to be, 14-4, like I said, or 14-3, like I said, in the podcast before. So yeah, I think it's going to be their year to take the 1 seed and hopefully, go far. And then in that case, they're going to be, well, we'll get to my 7 seed later.
So I just got to touch up on what Zeke put, because it's a little different than what we put. So
Okay.
he has the Bills as the 2 seed, and he has the Jets as the 7 seed. Ask me where he
Okay.
has the Dolphins.
Did he have them missing the playoffs?
He has them missing the playoffs.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
I
That's
mean, the AFC is competitive, but so he had, what was it, the Ravens or the Broncos beating them out? It would have had one of those 2 teams.
we'll, we'll get to that here in a second.
We'll get to that. We'll get
But
to that.
yeah, but yeah, he
I'm
doesn't
guessing
have
it's
them
the
because he
Ravens. I
also
think it's the Ravens, but
yeah. well, let's talk about let's talk about that division right now.
yeah,
So
why
we'll talk
don't
about
we? Yeah.
the AFC North. He has the Bengals winning the division as the 3 seed, and he
Okay.
has the Ravens because he believes in Lamar. I've
He
told him you
does.
can't
Yep.
rely on Lamar. You know,
Yeah.
um, he has them as the 5 seed. So
Oh,
I
okay.
have the only team making the playoffs from this division is the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I wanted to put the Steelers in there, and I've been talking this offseason that the Steelers are a playoff team. But there are 3 the AFC is just so stacked that there are 3 teams that are better than the Steelers that are going to be in the wild card. They are. I mean, my 7 seed is 11-6, and I just said that my 5 and 6 both were 12-5. So like the bar is high to make the playoffs for the AFC. The Steelers did go 11-6, but they just didn't own that head to head. So unfortunately, that's why they didn't make it out. Bengals 3 seed, 13-4, 6-0 in the division. It's really hard to do that nowadays, but I expect MVP candidate Joe Burrow, Offensive Player of the Year candidate Jamar Chase to go show out, and I think Zach Taylor. This is a year that he can be like, okay, this is our year. We're gonna go win this now.
Yeah, yeah. I also have the Bengals being the division winner at the 3 seed. Obviously, I have Joe Burrow as my MVP. I think he's going to be able to elevate that offense, consistently throughout the year, weeks 1 through 17. And he's with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon, hopefully.
Yeah.
I believe this offense is going to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. I believe that the defense may take a slight step back, which is why I didn't have them any higher than 3. I think their floor is probably 4. I have them winning the division no matter what. But I will say that the offense should be top 5 in the NFL, and I don't think you really need to say much more about that. I want to say quickly that when we talk about other teams in the AFC, specifically the Steelers, I think for me, what holds them back is yes, they have a great defense and they have a great culture, and they're going to have a winning record. But there's so many good teams in the AFC, and specifically good quarterbacks in the AFC. They're going to be making the playoffs. That it's just hard to put my faith in a Kenny Pickett who's only in his second year with receivers like George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. They're not bad receivers. They're good receivers. They're not average. They're good receivers, but let's look at these top teams that we have in our playoffs, and I'm not going to talk about the last team because we haven't, or I guess 2 of the teams yet that we haven't gone over, but let's just talk about the teams that we've talked about so far. So as far as QB and wide receiver tandem, Bills, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, great tandem. Jets, Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson. Bengals, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Dolphins, Tua and Tyreek. We haven't talked about the Chiefs, but you can pretty much pencil in him, Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. And I think you can pencil in a couple more teams that we'll talk about in a second. But when you talk about those tandems, man, and then you talk about Kenny Pickett, and we'll say Deontay Johnson, it just don't stack up offensively. And with Najee Harris having a really bad down year and having questions about that offensive line, I'm just not certain that they're going to be able to have the offensive output to withstand the AFC. I think if they were the type of team that was in the NFC, then you could maybe get away with it with less heavy scoring output offenses. But I don't think you can get away with it in the AFC. So for that reason, I have the Bengals making the 3 seed and being the only division or only team in the division to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I feel like the biggest thing that kind of something that we didn't plan on, but something that was actually really interesting is when we did our top 3 offensive trios and the top 3 defensive trios, I feel like that really kind of helped kind of solidify like how far behind the Steelers offense really is. Because I mean, when we look at all these offenses, like if we were to rank the 16 offenses on the AFC, they're probably like 11 to 13, and that could be even being generous. Defenses, they're going to be that probably in that top 5 category.
Right.
But they've also shown that like they're also really young on offense. They don't have an alpha wide receiver. Najee Harris is not super reliable. He had a good second half of the season, but everyone was calling for his head to at the first half. That offensive line isn't as stellar as it had been in running backs past with James Conner and Le'Veon Bell. And it's just that division, that could be one of the toughest divisions in the league, not only because you have one of the best teams, but because the Ravens could also finish second. I mean, that's what Zeke had. The Browns could finish second, which I know that you were high on the Browns last year. I unfortunately have them being last in the division, but last in the division at 7-10. So like not all too bad. I do have the Ravens going 9-8. So, but with how rocky that offense can be, I don't think that the Steelers can hang with a lot of these high-powered offenses, even if they do have Defensive Player of the Year candidate TJ Watt.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you completely.
So then we can move to the AFC South, which I will say will be the worst division in football this year in amount of wins from that division. But the team that I do not think will be one of the worst teams is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I have winning the division, and so does Zeke. We both have them as the 4 seed. As much as I really wanted to have them be higher, it's just 13 wins, and 13 wins is higher than 12. So the Jaguars were not going to be a higher seed. Um, and I don't think that's a bad thing for them. I mean, they're going to have a tough task with how it came out. They'll be facing the Dolphins, but I think this is a good opportunity for this team, to have a good season. Seeding doesn't matter because they showed last year that they can hang with anyone, especially in that second half of the season when their backs were up against the wall. They were one of the best teams in football. It was them, the 49ers, and the Bengals. Those are the three best teams. I guess you could throw in the Lions. Those are the four best teams the last 8-9 weeks of the season, including the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I also have the Jaguars winning the division in a division that's not going to be very good. I have them making the 4 seed, and then it's a big drop off. I think we all agree that if they don't end up winning the division, it was a big disappointment as far as how this team was supposed to be progressive and Trevor Lawrence progressing as that quarterback. And I mean, I think the next team up that we would probably have winning, if there would be a team, would be the Titans, and that would just be on the back of Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill and a mix of Will Levis and maybe some Malik Willis. But um, I don't have too much to add on to that. I think if there's one division winner that we can pencil in for sure, it should be the Jaguars out of this AFC playoffs.
I agree. I have the Texans, and I do believe in the Texans. I think that they're going to be a year or two away from being a playoff worthy team. But the
Hmm.
Texans, I have them winning 5 games. I do have the Titans winning only 4, which
Okay.
is very low compared to what a lot of people will think. But I don't think that I believe in D Hop. I don't want to get on D Hop's bad side. I believe in Derrick Henry. I don't want to get on his bad side, but I just don't think that. I think this team is past their prime. I think they were the 1 seed
Yeah.
2 years ago, best team in the league. They were a run centric team. They lost some key people on defense. They lost AJ Brown. I just don't think. I think that last year was a shot in the gut because they could have won the division that Week 18 game. Couldn't do it, and I think that it might be time to start rebuilding still. And then I had the Colts winning only 3 games. So that is a total of 12 games won combined between those 3 teams. The worst division in football.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that if you look at the comparison between the AFC and the NFC, they kind of remind me of the AFC version of like the Buccaneers, where you're trading the defense off for the veteran quarterback, but like there's only so much you can do with an average veteran quarterback as you can do with a veteran defense that is kind of out of their prime as well. There's only so much you can work with that. But I really think it started with the AJ Brown trade and drafting Traylon Burks. I like Traylon Burks out of Arkansas, but he really hasn't come to fruition. And honestly, I can't really say it's really his fault because you put him in a run heavy system, with not really any help as far as other receivers to go with, and then you give him Ryan Tannehill, and it's just not really the recipe for success. I mean, you could say you put him on really any of these other AFC playoff teams or former playoff teams a couple years ago, and he had more success. But I think it really started with that AJ Brown trade because after that, it seemed like they really lost a lot of power through the air and a lot of that power dynamic that AJ Brown brought with him that opened up the run game, and obviously losing guys like Taylor Lewin and other tackles and guards that were kind of the pillars of their foundation of their system, really hurt them in the long run. And obviously, Derrick Henry is still Derrick Henry, but he's not getting any younger. He's getting older, and that he's about to hit that age where you kind of fall off as a running back, no matter how good you are, whether you're a Hall of Fame running back or you're just another dime a dozen. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's time to rebuild, and it's going to be interesting. I think I'm not exactly sure, and I'm kind of going on a tandem here, but I don't know if Will Levis is their answer or if Malik Willis is their answer, but it's going to be interesting to see it where they go as far as with quarterback. I think they could be in play for a Trey Lance trade if they don't have to give up more than like a fifth, sixth rounder.
Yeah. So the last one that we'll talk about is the AFC West. So I think Chiefs are going to reign supreme here still at 13 wins. They're going to be my 2 seed since I have Buffalo winning. Zeke has Kansas City as the 1 seed, which I could see with MVP candidate Patrick Mahomes. And we both had the Chargers making the playoffs. That's another team that's right above the Steelers for me. I have them as a 7 seed, and he has them as a 6 seed.
Interesting. I also had my Chiefs as not my Chiefs. I had the Chiefs as my 2nd seed. And then I had the Chargers as the last wild card spot as the 7th seed. So they're going to be playing in the first round. And so, I think I don't really think much needs to be said about the Chiefs. When you have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid, I think you kind of expect them to be obviously the division winner, but you expect them to be at minimum a top 2 seed, maybe third at worst. And so, they should make it there. But I really think this is kind of the last hurrah for the Chargers and their coaching staff, as well as their older receivers and Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. I think Justin Herbert, whether all that stuff goes on to wherever they're going to go on to, I think he's the foundation of the team no matter what. But with that being said, I think this is kind of like the last chance with this roster and coaching staff where there's some real decisions to be made where they're looking at the division and they're thinking, Patrick Mahomes is still a very young quarterback. They're not going to get any worse over the next 5 years. Like, we're going to have to start making some big changes. And if they end up missing the playoffs, then I think that's kind of the telltale sign that you have to make some changes, because if you can't even make the playoffs as a wild card seed, and I understand, and you and me both understand, that the AFC is not easy. It's tough to make the playoffs. But with Justin Herbert, that has to be an expectation, especially when you have Austin Eckler and you have the defense that they have. So obviously health has been an issue, but sometimes it comes down to, it can't always be an excuse. You have to be able to overcome that, because there's other teams that run into those problems every single year. And you have to be able to overcome that. You look at a team like the Jaguars, who really didn't have much to work with. And like we talked about, we understand that the AFC South isn't a very good division, but they're still able to make the playoffs and go into the playoffs and be competitive with a hurt quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, and they're still able to make do with what they have. Obviously, they lost that game, but they're still able to have a really good game against the Chiefs. And you have to be able to overcome injuries at some point, and it can't be an ongoing excuse.
Exactly. Like, how many times does this have to happen in order for you to start realizing that you're the problem? You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think that the Chargers can keep falling short in their last game of the season. You blow a 27-0 lead, or just settle for a tie in 2 years ago and just go into the playoffs. The first time that you've been there in a while, and still just keep falling short. So, and then with the Broncos, I think the addition of Sean Payton really helps. I have them going 10-7, but I just don't think that they still need a few more. That I don't think they have an alpha wide receiver. I think that what they have is solid number 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
They have Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, but they need an alpha. I think Russell Wilson can be good this year, but I do have questions about Javonte Williams. He was a rookie last year, tore his ACL in like game 2 or 3, so we'll see what he can do. But I think an alpha wide receiver is really what this team is missing. I think that defense, even though they traded away Bradley Chubb last year, I think that they have an opportunity to really be a good defense, especially with Pat Surtain. Even though I think people give him a little bit more credit than what he needs, but he is, in the end of the day, a really good corner, and that I think that this Broncos team can be good. But the Raiders, I just don't think that. I have them going 8-9. I might have given them a little too many generous wins. I trust the direction that they're going, but I don't trust Josh McDaniels, which is really hard. Like it's like riding a roller coaster, like that's 100% safe, but not trusting the operator. You know,
Yeah.
that,
Right.
that's how I feel right now with that. So I don't think that yeah, I just don't think that it can. I just don't think it can work this year for the Raiders.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to just the conference in general. You know, the AFC is just going to be so tough that it's just going to be hard to overcome a lot of those great teams and great quarterbacks. I mean, you know, obviously, I think I'm not low on Jimmy Garoppolo, but I'm not high on him. I'm about average. And in the AFC, an average quarterback is just probably not going to get it done. I think when it comes down to it. And I really didn't even touch up on the Broncos. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. They have good number two guys. I like Jerry Judy and Cortland Sutton, but one looks like Cortland Sutton's going to be out for, I believe, the whole year. And then I just got the news this morning that Jerry Judy was going to be out multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. So with the season starting in a couple weeks, that's not the news you want to hear. And then obviously, I have no idea what that offensive line is going to look like. It really hasn't been good since, if we're being honest, probably 2016, probably after Peyton Manning's departure. And so, you know, with that being said, obviously they're going to have a good defense, but with the lack of weapons and offensive continuity and a first-year head coach in Sean Payton with Russell Wilson, yes, it's going to help that connection, but it's not going to be enough to win enough games to even be close to a wild card spot, in my opinion.
Yep. So if you're watching on YouTube here, I believe, and you should double check yours, PT. Make sure that
Okay,
who is your 7th seed in the AFC?
Chargers.
Chargers. Okay. All right. So this is what we had for our seedings here. Uh, I like that. I mean, there's a lot that are very similar. You know, we all had the Jaguars be that 4 seed. The Falcons is anywhere between that 4 or 5. We do have some kind of outliers like the Dolphins. I mean, 5-1, not even pictured. You know,
Yeah.
you and I don't even have the Ravens, and Zeke does. So this is a lot more closer together than it
Cowboys
was
as
last year.
well.
Cowboys is yeah. You know,
Yeah.
because I had 7-1-5. So we'll see with how this season will play out. We have, I mean, it's football's back. You know, we got less than a week, and then we got that Thursday night game, and then, you know, I mean, uh, college week 1 starts
Yeah.
soon, so
Yep.
it's back. It's the thing that sucks about football is it's so fun. Everyone loves it, but it has the longest off season out of all of the major sports.
Yep.
But we're back, and I'm excited for the season. More so for everyone else's team other than mine, but we'll 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 see what happens. Do you have anything that you would like to add on?
Not too much. I'm really excited too. I mean, I think I don't know if you know. Obviously, we've been doing this podcast for about a year, maybe a year and a couple months, and obviously, people don't know that you know I've been a Falcons fan since since I started watching football, and this is really the first time since the Matt Ryan era where I can really say I have confidence where we're going to be a decent team, and you know, even before the Matt Ryan era, you know, it goes back 5, 6 years ago, last time we made the playoffs. And I feel decently confident that we're kind of out of the mud and we can be a decent playoff team. And I'm very excited to see where we go, not only for us, but where the rest of the NFC South is going to go and the NFL in general. I think it's going to be a great season.
Yep. And as some of you guys may know, I'm a Raiders fan. I've been a Raiders fan my entire life, and this is only going to be the 4th year that I can legally drink week 1 and just drink my sorrows away. So that's what I that's what I'm looking forward to this year. So hopefully
Yeah,
Husker football doesn't let me down either.
yeah, yeah,
Because the worst feeling, and I know that you've kind of felt this for as a Falcons fan for the last few years, is that Saturday feeling, Huskers lose, dang. Well, at least I got the Falcons tomorrow. And then then the Falcons lose. And it's like, well, there goes my perfect weekend.
Yeah. At some point, I just had to start looking towards my fantasy team. That was the saving grace. At least my fantasy team would be all right. But sometimes you go 0 for 3.
Right? Oh god, and those are the worst weeks.
Yeah.
But
just want to forget about it, man.
But good conversation. We'll see who's right the most. And I know you and I have a lot of similar stuff. Zeke's got some different stuff than us too, but we'll see who's right, who's wrong, and who's crazy. So
Yeah.
once again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP. Follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. I've been Sam Holcroft.
I've been Payton Thompson.
Thanks for listening.